The aide finds you sitting in the same chair by the window, the one facing the parking lot, the one you've sat in every single day for the last 11 months. She doesn't ask why you're watching the entrance again. She already knows. You're waiting for a car that isn't coming. "Mr. Voss," she says softly, setting your lunch tray on the little table beside you. You didn't touch your breakfast. You don't answer right away. Your hands, spotted with age and trembling slightly now, rest on your knees like they've forgotten what they're for. 84 years old. And the thing that hurts most isn't your knees or your heart or the pills lined up in a little paper cup twice a day. It's the silence of a phone that never rings. Your name is Alistair Voss. You built a life once, a real one, with your hands in your back and 40 years of getting up before the sun. And now you live in room 114 of Willowmere Senior Living, where the walls are the color of oatmeal and the television plays reruns. Nobody watches, and where your only son hasn't visited in 341 days. You know the number exactly. You've counted. If a story like this has ever made you feel something, the quiet ache of being forgotten by the people who were supposed to love you the most, stay with me here for a moment. Because this is the kind of story worth carrying with you, and if it moves you the way it's already moving me telling it, consider subscribing, because there are more stories like Alistair's waiting to be told. And they deserve to be heard by people who still believe in dignity. Because dignity is the thing they take from you slowest, and it's the thing you miss the most. You weren't always alone in a room that smells like antiseptic and canned soup. You used to have a house, a good one, red brick, 2 stories. With a porch swing you built yourself out of cedar planks the summer your son, Corbin, turned 10. You used to have a wife, Marguerite, who filled that house with the smell of cinnamon and the sound of gospel, records on Sunday mornings. You used to have hands that meant something, hands that laid foundations for half the buildings in your town, hands that taught your son how to swing a hammer and read a level and shake another man's hand like you meant it. You were a foreman for 31 years at Kestrel Construction. You never missed a day. You never took a shortcut. When Marguerite passed 11 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 4 months from diagnosis to the funeral, you kept working because the alternative was sitting in that house alone, and the silence there was worse than any job site. Corbin was 32 then, married to a woman named Rosalind who wore expensive perfume and spoke to you like you were a subcontractor she'd hired for the day. You never said anything about it. You told yourself that was just her way. You told yourself Corbin loved you even when he stopped calling on Sundays. Even when the visits went from weekly to monthly to, "We'll see. Dad, things are busy." Things are always busy for people who've decided you're no longer worth the trip. You retired at 72. Your knees gave out first, then your hip. Then a small stroke that left your left hand a little slower than it used to be. You sold the house, the one with the porch swing, because you couldn't manage the stairs anymore. And Corbin helped you move into Willowmere. He signed the paperwork. He shook the administrator's hand. He told you, "This is the best place for you now. Dad, state of the art. You'll make friends." You didn't make friends. You made a routine. Breakfast at 7, the window seat by 8, lunch you don't taste, a nap you don't need, dinner alone at a table for 4, where 3 chairs sit, empty because the other residents who used to sit with you have passed on, one by one, and nobody replaced them. 341 days since Corbin last walked through that door. The tension didn't arrive all at once. It arrived the way water wears down stone, slowly. And then one day you looked up and the shape of your life had changed entirely. It started with the phone calls getting shorter. Then it moved to voicemails that went unreturned for days. Then Christmas came and went with a card, not a visit, a card mailed, with a printed signature. And you sat in your room and read Merry Christmas, Dad, Corbin, Rosalind, and Renly over and over, tracing the letters like they might turn into something warmer, if you looked long enough. Renly is your granddaughter. She's 12 now. You've seen her twice in the last 2 years. Once at a birthday party you weren't really invited to. More tolerated, standing awkwardly near the cake table while Rosalind's family, where people with new money and old opinions, looked at you like a relic from a life Corbin had outgrown. The worst part wasn't the neglect. Neglect you could almost understand. Busy lives, busy schedules, the modern excuse machine that never runs out of fuel. The worst part was the one time you called Corbin directly, voice shaking, and asked him plainly, "Son, did I do something wrong?" And he sighed. Actually sighed, like you were an inconvenience wrapped in a question. "Dad, it's not that simple." Rosalind thinks, we think, it's better if things stay steady. You're settled there. You're taken care of. We don't need to complicate things. Complicate things. That's what you'd become. A complication. You hung up the phone that night and sat in the dark for a long time. And for the first time in your life, you understood what it meant to be erased by people who were still, technically, your family. The staff at Willowmere noticed, of course. Most of them are kind in the practiced, professional way of people paid to be kind. But there was one, an aide named Adelia Cross, 28 years old, raising a 6-year-old boy on her own after her husband left before the baby could even walk. Adelia worked nights and doubles because the pay was thin and the bills were thick. And somehow, in the middle of all that exhaustion, she still had something left over for you. She'd bring you coffee that wasn't on the approved list. Real coffee. From the break room, not the decaf sludge the kitchen served. She'd sit with you for 10 minutes during her break and let you talk about Marguerite, about the porch swing, about the summer you taught Corbin to lay brick, and he got so proud of himself he wouldn't stop showing the neighbors. She never once looked at the clock while you talked. You remind me of my grandfather, she told you once. He used to say the measure of a man isn't what he built. It's who he built it for. You didn't know it then. But that sentence would matter more than she could have imagined. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October, the kind of gray afternoon where the light through the window looks like it's given up too. Renly's 12th birthday. You knew because Adelia had mentioned it. She'd overheard you counting the months since you'd seen your granddaughter, and she'd looked it up quietly, the way she did most things. You called Corbin that morning. It rang 4 times before he picked up, and you could hear the party already starting behind him. Laughter, music, the particular chaos of a house full of people who weren't you. Dad, hey, can I call you back? We're kind of in the middle of something. I just wanted to wish Renly a happy birthday. A pause, then muffled, like he'd covered the phone. It's Grandpa, and then Rosalind's voice. Not muffled enough. Tell him we'll call him later. We don't have time right now. We don't have time right now. You said okay. You said tell her happy birthday from me. You said it's fine, go on, have fun. And then you hung up, and you sat in that chair by the window, and something in your chest cracked open in a way you didn't have a name for. Not a heart attack. Something quieter and somehow worse. The specific pain of realizing that the family you built, the family you'd have died for without a second thought, had decided you were optional. You didn't cry. Men like you weren't raised to cry, not even at 84, not even alone in a room that smelled like bleach and boiled vegetables. You just sat there as the sun went down, and for the first time since Marguerite died, you thought about what it would feel like to simply stop, existing quietly enough that nobody would even have to notice the difference. Adelia found you like that an hour later, untouched dinner tray still on the table. The room dark because you hadn't bothered to turn on the light. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just pulled up the chair across from you, took your hand, your rough, calloused, 84-year-old hand, and sat with you in the silence until it didn't feel quite so heavy. You matter, Mr. Voss, she said. Whatever they think, whatever they do, you matter. You didn't believe her, not that night. But you didn't forget it either. The days after that felt different, though nothing outwardly had changed. The routine stayed the same. Breakfast, the window, the untouched lunch, the empty chairs at dinner. But something in you had shifted quietly, the way a foundation settles after the frost. You started noticing things you hadn't before. The way Adelia always knocked, even when the door was open, as if your room was still a place worth respecting. The way she remembered that you took your coffee black, no sugar, because sugar reminded you too much of the sweet tea Marguerite used to make on the porch. The way she asked questions and actually waited for the answers, instead of already reaching for the next task on her clipboard. You started looking forward to her shifts the way you used to look forward to Sundays. The turning point arrived 3 weeks later, in the form of a phone call you weren't expecting, from a man you'd almost forgotten existed. His name was Percival Ashworth, an attorney who'd handled your affairs decades ago, back when you and Marguerite first bought the house on Thistlewood Lane. You hadn't spoken to him in 15 years. But there he was on the phone, his voice older now, but still sharp, still precise. Alistair, I need to talk to you about your estate. I think it's time we revisited it. You'd made a will years ago. A simple one, everything to Corbin, the way it was supposed to go. But something in Percival's voice, patient, careful, giving you room, made you pause. What's brought this on, Percival? Marguerite asked me to check in on you years ago before she passed. She had a feeling. She made me promise I'd make sure you were taken care of, properly, not just financially. He paused. Alistair, are you being taken care of? And something about being asked directly, by someone who wasn't paid to ask, by someone who'd known you back when you were still a man, with a wife and a porch swing and a son who used to run to greet you at the door. Something about that broke the dam. You told him everything. 341 days. The Christmas card. The phone call on Renly's birthday. We don't have time right now. You told him about Adelia, about the coffee that wasn't on the approved list, about the way she sat with you in the dark without needing you to explain why you were sitting alone, with the lights off. Percival was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed the shape of everything that came after. Alistair, you never told your family how much Kestrel construction stock was worth when you retired. Did you? You hadn't. It had never seemed important. You'd taken stock options instead of a pension bonus back in '98, a decision Marguerite had quietly encouraged. One nobody else in the family had ever paid attention to because nobody else had ever asked. That stock had split twice. Kestrel Construction had gone public 11 years ago. The modest nest egg you tucked away and never mentioned. Because who would care? Who would even ask? Had grown into something substantial. Something that, if you're honest with yourself, your son had never once inquired about because he'd never once inquired about you. I want to change my will, you told Percival. Your voice didn't shake. For the first time in months, it didn't shake at all. I want to do it properly this time. You met with Percival twice more over the following weeks. In the small conference room at Willowmere that smelled faintly of hand sanitizer and old carpet. You didn't do it out of spite. You want that understood. Wherever this story reaches whoever hears it. You didn't do it to punish Corbin. Not really, though a small, honest part of you knew the timing wasn't an accident. You did it because you finally understood something Marguerite must have understood long before you did. Love isn't measured by blood. It's measured by presence. By who shows up when the room is dark and the tray is untouched and there's nothing to gain from sitting there except the simple decision to care. You left a modest portion to Corbin, Rosalind, and Renly, enough that they wouldn't feel erased. Because that wasn't the kind of man you wanted to be, even now. But the bulk of it, the house money, the stock, the savings that had quietly multiplied into more than anyone at Willowmere could have guessed, sat behind the eyes of the old man in the window. Seat, you left to Adelia. Cross, enough to pay off her husband's old debts that had followed her like a shadow. Enough to move her and her son somewhere with a yard. Enough, Percival estimated, to put that boy through college without her, working a single double shift. To make it happen, you also left a letter, not just for Adelia, for Corbin too. The months that followed moved slower than any months you could remember, the way time does when a decision has already been made, and all that's left is the waiting. You didn't tell Adelia what you'd done. You didn't want her kindness to change even a fraction of a degree. Didn't want her to start treating you like a benefactor instead of just an old man who liked hearing about her son's spelling tests and his obsession with dinosaurs. She kept showing up exactly the same. Coffee, black, no sugar, 10 minutes on her break. The same patient silence when you needed it. The same gentle questions when you didn't. You passed in your sleep 4 months later, in February on a Thursday night, when the wind outside rattled the windows of Willowmere like it was trying to get in. Adelia was the one who found you the next morning. She was the one who cried. Real tears, not the practiced sympathy of a job. Well done, but the raw grief of someone who had actually loved you. She sat with you one last time, the way she always had, and she held your hand until the funeral home arrived. Corbin came to the funeral, of course. Grief has a way of making people show up too late, dressed appropriately, saying all the right things to people who no longer need to hear them. The will was read on a Tuesday in March, in Percival Ashworth's office, with Corbin and Rosalind sitting stiff-backed in leather chairs, already mentally spending money that would never be theirs. Adelia sat near the back, in her work scrubs because she'd come straight from a shift, looking like she didn't quite belong in a room like that. She almost hadn't come at all. She only did because Percival had insisted. When Percival read the terms, the amount left to Adelia Cross, the letter addressed to her, the letter addressed to Corbin, the room went silent in a way that silence rarely manages. Rosalind's face went the color of old paper. Corbin just stared, and stared, and then finally asked the only question that mattered to him. "Who is Adelia Cross?" Adelia answered before Percival could. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. "I was the person who sat with your father when nobody else did." Percival handed Corbin the letter last. In it, you'd written the truth as plainly as you could manage. You told him you loved him, that you'd always love him, that nothing could undo 32 years of being his father. But you also told him that love without presence is just a word, and that the woman receiving what you'd built wasn't a stranger who'd manipulated. A lonely old man, she was the only person, in 341 days and the 4 months after, who had shown up. You told him you hoped someday he'd understand, not for your sake, for Renly's, so that when he was 84 and sitting by some window somewhere, someone would remember to come. The story made local headlines within the week. Nursing home aide inherits fortune from forgotten resident, and then it spread further. The way stories about quiet justice sometimes do, because people are hungry for proof. That decency still gets rewarded, somewhere in this world. Adelia didn't want the attention. She used the money exactly as you'd have hoped, paid off the debts, bought a small house with a yard, kept working, not because she had to anymore, but because she said the residents at Willowmere still needed someone in the mornings, and she wasn't ready to stop being that person. Corbin, for what it's worth, changed. Not overnight, not perfectly. But he started visiting his own mother-in-law more, started showing up to things he used to skip, started teaching Renly the things you'd once taught him. How to hold a level, how to shake a hand like you mean it, how to notice who's sitting alone in a room. Some lessons only cost everything, because that's the only price that makes them stick. There's a small park bench now, near the entrance of Willowmere, with a plaque that reads simply, "For those who show up." Adelia had it installed with a small piece of what you left her, though she never told anyone that's what it was for. New residents ask about it sometimes. The staff just say it's for anyone who needs somewhere to sit and remember someone. You spent the last months of your life in a chair by a window, waiting for a car that never came. But you didn't die waiting. You died knowing that somewhere in that building, someone had chosen you, not out of obligation, not out of blood, but because you were worth choosing. And in the end, that was the only inheritance that ever really mattered. The proof that you had been seen. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life sitting in a chair by a window right now, waiting, call them today. Not next week, today. Because dignity isn't something we owe people when it's convenient. It's something we owe them while they can still feel it. They will remember who sat with them in the dark long after they've forgotten who sent the card.